Welcome to the Matt Phillips Podcast. I am Matt Phillips, your sales leadership coach, mental toughness expert, and founder of Matt Phillips Coaching. We help sales managers and leaders make more money, save time, and become kick-ass leaders of their sales teams. And that's what we're here to talk about on this podcast. We are here to give you the tools and tactics to build a well-oiled sales machine and teach you the mental toughness skills so you can show up confident, focused, emotionally in control, and ready to energize your team. It's time to talk sales leadership and mental toughness. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to this episode of the Matt Phillips Podcast. It is Matt Phillips. Excited to be with you this morning. And I want to challenge you a little bit this morning. I want you to get to think a little bit differently. I was listening to a sermon a couple of weeks back, and there was this one phrase that the pastor said, which really struck me. It struck me so much that it actually made me take out a piece of paper and reflect a little bit and think about my business and my life and where I wanted to go. And the phrase that he used was this: we limit our potential because we limit our dreams. We limit our potential because we limit our dreams. And I think in every area of life, we can fall into this trap of just limiting ourselves, right? Of taking what we think could happen, and then we dream about happening, and then we discount it. We haircut it a little bit, and we say, well, that'd be nice. That's 100% though. So I'm going to haircut it to 80%. So if I get 80% there, that's good enough. And I don't know what it was about this sermon, but I walked out of there and I'm like, my goodness, like, am I haircutting myself? Am I putting a limit on what is possible in my business, for my family, in all these different areas of my life? And as I reflected and I thought, a couple stories popped up in my head I wanted to share with you, because the goal of, I want you to walk out of this podcast thinking bigger, dreaming larger, and making sure and challenging yourself to make sure you're not limiting yourself. Because what I found is that when we put boundaries on that possibility, we stay within the boundaries. When we dare to dream a little bit and push ourselves and kind of go big, we tend to surprise ourselves. And that's when amazing things happen. So there's a couple things that I want you to focus on, a couple stories that popped in my head. As I was preparing for this concept, there were kind of three different, two people, I should say, and another group. So three total that popped in my head. Because I think the first step in this whole thing is the question of, are we surrounded by the right people? Whether they are friends, spouses, mentors, coaches, like, do we have the right people around us? And I remember in particular, I flew out, this is a couple of years ago, to San Diego to spend a day with this individual, this coach. It was a full day session. I did all sorts of preparation in anticipation of this, but I got to spend a day with this individual. And I remember at one point during our talk, we were talking about money, right? Revenue. Because, every business has to have revenue, cash flow to survive, to thrive, to continue to grow and continue to have that impact. And so we were just talking about finances. It's just a key component, nothing wrong with it. And so he asked me how much revenue I want to earn in the next 12 months. And I said the number. And I'll never forget the look on his face. The look, maybe you've got something similar to this before, but the look that he gave me was something of like, that's it. That's easy. That was the look. Like, that's easy. And I'll never forget it. I remember I called my wife as I was driving to the airport. And I said, oh my gosh, I said the number, and this is the look that he gave me. And now this individual is super successful. He's probably made 10, 20 times the number, maybe more. I don't know, the number that I said. And I'll never forget it, because he'd already been there. He'd done it. And he knew what was possible. And in that moment, just that look, he was challenging me to be like, Matt, come on, man. You got this. Like, you can do this. I've done it. And you can do more. I'll never forget that look. I knew at that moment I was surrounded by a great person to help push me, challenge me to dream bigger. Another individual that popped in my head that I work with still to this day, and if you haven't listened to the podcast, go listen to it, but Jim Brogan, just a couple of podcasts prior to this, he is my coach, right? And his bread and butter is NFL quarterbacks and athletes and executives at huge companies. And every single day that we get on our coaching call, he pushes me to dream bigger, to think about the impact that we could have, to help me stay connected with my why, and not just some simple kind of like, oh, just be nice to people, but like to dream about the impact, like the huge, massive impact that we could have on people. And, I recorded a whole podcast just even on the why and how I misunderstood it for the longest time until I finally figured it out. Now that's what we talk about in our different programs when I'm coaching people. But that's what Jim and I talk about every single time we jump on a call of like, what's the impact here? Let's dream a little bigger, push a little harder. Now, I'm not here saying that bigger is always better. I'm not saying you have to have this massive bank account. I'm not saying you have to have that really nice car, really nice house. I'm saying that in a lot of situations, again, we tend to put limits there where there really shouldn't be any. The third example that popped in my head of like surrounding yourself with great people is, you've heard me say on the podcast before, but I joined a mastermind group of 30 business owners in the digital space. You have a digital product, an online product. So just like our sales manager leadership program that as of this recording is coming very soon. And we have our high performance leadership program for people outside of sales as well to grow as leaders and become mentally tough. But I remember signing up for this group back in January of this year, actually December of last year. And honestly, I was scared to death because in talking with the owner of this group, there's some pretty amazing people in there. They're doing some pretty darn amazing things, and they're thinking big and they're taking big action upon it. And I was a little intimidated, to be honest, because I'm like, oh my goodness, like, can I keep up? Boy, and they do completely different things than me. So all different niches along the way. But I'm like, oh my goodness, like these individuals and the owner of this group are going to push me substantially. And I knew at that moment, I had this moment of hesitation. I knew that's exactly what I needed to do. That's the type of group I needed to join. And I will tell you, I just got back from one of our trips. We take 3 trips per year. And I just got back from my trip about a week and a half ago, and I was pushed yet again to think and dream bigger, to go after the potential that is within me. Hey everyone, wanted to take a quick break from the podcast to tell you about a new cheat sheet that is available for you. Now, one thing we believe is that if you're going to be the most effective sales leader possible, you have to know your numbers. And there are all sorts of metrics that we can track, that we should track, that sometimes we feel like we should be tracking. And that's why we put together the sales metrics cheat sheet. It is a list of all the metrics that you should consider, ultimately taking that list and boiling it down to the key metrics that will make sure you are staying on track and give you indications when you are off, not only from a sales perspective, but from a leadership perspective as well. Head on over to mattphillipscoaching.com/metrics. Download that cheat sheet today so that you are that leader that knows their numbers inside and out. Now, back to the podcast. And that's really the first step. And I wanted to challenge you with a little bit, right? Of when you think bigger, when you dream bigger, first question is, do you have the right people around you? And maybe you're at the point now where you're like, yes, Matt, I've got the right people around me. Maybe you're at the point now where it's time to make a change. It's time to seek out some people. And whether that's, joining a program like ours, or going and finding a mentor, or going to talk to a boss or a colleague and ask for some more assistance and more guidance, you need to have those people around you. I do it. I know my coach, Jim, does it. I mean, every time I talk to him, he's out to lunch with these neuroscientists talking about the next up and coming thing and like what's new in the brain. And oh my gosh, it's awesome, right? That's why I have these guests on the podcast, because they're pushing the limits of what's possible. And that's what I love. I love being surrounded with people like that. So that's the first thing. Like what adjustments do you need to make, right? And honestly, sometimes I've had to figure it out that in the past I've had this mentality of early on in my business, I'm like, well, I'll figure it out. And as soon as I realized that, man, goodness, if you just surround yourself with the right people, it just accelerates growth. It's pretty incredible. The second kind of thing that I wanted to bring to mind and just challenge you on again a little bit today is, when was the last time you actually sat down and dreamed about what was possible? Like literally, what was the last time you reflected on, what do I want to earn? Or Like, what kind of vacations do we want to go on? What experiences do I want to create? Like, why am I even doing this stuff? When was the last time you sat down and reflected and actually challenged? Like, is that big enough, bold enough? Like, what adjustments, what shifts do I need to start making right now? And I think that's such an important step that's overlooked, because ultimately, when we sit down and reflect upon that, then becomes this critical, important piece of then what action can I start taking now? What plan can I start building now to begin that first step forward to making that a reality? And it's, not getting from a place of overwhelm, but starting to build the plan to make that happen. And it was actually interesting last night. I didn't sleep particularly well last night, and I was just excited about a lot of stuff. But, I actually got up at one point and wrote some things down, had to shift my mindset a little bit. Because what I found when I got up is we've got big dreams for our business, right? We're making it happen. We're taking lots of action, stuff like that. But even last night, I had this feeling of overwhelm come over me, of like this thought of like, oh my God, there's so much to do. Like, where do I even start? I think sometimes when we dream big too, we can, if we're not careful, get to that place of overwhelm, thinking there's too much to do. And so what ends up happening, instead of taking action, we take no action at all. And so last night when I got up, I just reflected a little bit and I started writing out like, okay, what are the things? Like, what are the steps that I need to do? And I have a background in CrossFit, and there's these workouts of the day, they call them WODs, and some are just brutal, right? And they call them chippers, meaning they put the workout on the board and it's just like, put your head down and chip away at it, right? It's like taking that axe and you got to cut down a tree. It's like you just chip away at it. It's like one swing of the axe at a time. And eventually that tree falls down. As you chip away at that workout, eventually the workout is done. I remember back early in my career and working in for Ernst & Young, one of my bosses, I was overwhelmed and I went to her, I was like, I just don't even know where to start. And she said, Matt, make a list, start chipping away at it. Just one thing at a time. And I remember doing that and I was done with the list before I knew it. Like literally I was like, whoa, like I'm done. There is no overwhelm. I had the same thing happen last night, that in order to achieve this big dream, we've got to take big action. But it's not big action. It's little steps along the way, little bits of action. It's little swings of the axe. And ultimately we'll cut that tree down. And so I woke up this morning, fired up, excited about what I got to do today, even recording this podcast. But now I get to look at my list and say, okay, what axe am I swinging today? And I'm going to go just chip away at that little tree right there. One swing today, one swing tomorrow, one swing the next day. And before I know it, we're going to have every program that was dreaming in our head done. We're going to have every webinar and masterclass built before I know it, just chipping away at it. So keep that in mind. So out of today, here's what I want you to take away from this. One, do you have the right people in your life? And what adjustments you need to make. Two, I want you to really reflect and dream a little bit bigger, right? And ask yourself that question, like, am I thinking too small here? Am I putting a glass ceiling above me where there shouldn't be no ceiling at all, where it doesn't even exist except in my mind? And third, I want you to simplify your process, simplify the actions that you need to take, right? If you want to achieve whatever, being a great parent, crushing sales, being a great leader, I don't know what it is for you. I want you to identify those actions and shift your mentality like, I'm just going to chip away. I'm going to pick one thing and chip at it. I'm going to bring my axe to work. And I guarantee before you know it, that tree, just like for me, will be lying on the ground. We limit our potential by limiting our dreams. And I don't want you to do that anymore. If nothing else, know that Matt Phillips does not dream small. Matt dreams big. Matt's taking action upon those every single day, chipping away at the tree, and you can do the same thing too. Go make your dreams a reality. I know you can do it. I'm here for you. Have a fabulous rest of your day. Thank you for joining us today on the Matt Phillips Podcast. If you are like us, we know that you are here to do great things, to become the sales leader that makes things happen and drives big time sales results. We know you have that big vision, and we are here to help get you where you want to go. We're here to help you develop that like unstoppable, rock solid leadership skill set and help you train to master the one true differentiator, mental toughness. We would love to be part of your journey. So if you are ready, head over to mattphillipscoaching.com and check out the ways that we can help. As always, please share this episode and make sure you subscribe by clicking the button below. Thank you again. And now, go crush the day.